country is a constitutional democracy with a constitution that provides, amongst other things, the Bill of Rights, a number of institutions for accountability, but also other institutions like security services, whose role is clearly defined in our constitution as a foundation, a structural foundation of our nation. Our national democratic society that we all envisioned in 1955, when the Freedom Charter was penned out by our people, has found its space into our constitution. This society is founded on the respect for human rights, the rule of law, good governance, independent judiciary, and independent media. We took time to reiterate the challenges that we are facing of our time, especially that most nation states are grappling with, to find a correct balance between addressing security issues of our nation while at the same time respecting human rights, of which some experts, they think the two have an inherent tensions. The reality that we know from our own experience and constitution is that the two are interdependent and mutual reinforcing. We also highlighted a number of emerging threats, looking at the global perspective and how it impacts on our own national security. That the world, in our own case, has been having a difficult situation that they have faced, and all intelligence services around the world, we are grappling with a number of issues. Amongst them is our ability to counter international terrorism, the question of radicalization and violent extremism. The whole globe is faced with economic meltdown. There is the question of environmental degradation, the issues of forced immigration, food security, and we have witnessed lately unconstitutional regime change and color revolution, where a number of non-state actors are acting with impunity. We have assured South Africans that despite the deterioration of the global security, the security forces of our country have made a conclusion when we did our threat assessment that our country remains stable, and more importantly, our Southern African Development Cooperation region. However, we have a duty to remain vigilant as the security services, more as state security, because our national security threats, they do not play themselves in a vacuum, but they are coming into a deeper, sharper focus within a specific context. We've managed to caution the House that our country cannot continue to take lightly any manifestation in our society and body politics that have a potential to advocate for unconstitutional change of government. Ours, as empowered by the Constitution, is to ensure the maintenance of national security and the advancement of our national interests. We did make a reference to the Constitution, wherein that South Africans, they have all the rights enshrined there, but these rights have limitation. And South Africans are peace-loving people, but there are those amongst us who hate the peace, the tranquility, and the gains we have achieved. We have also spoken about the question of securing our borders, the good work that continues to be done by our sung heroes and heroines who work in the cluster. The busting that has happened in the various border gates, you will know Libombo, you will know the airports and others, worth of millions of rands, especially around the question of drugs, but at the very same time, the questions of monies that have been getting into the country. Without having intelligence-driven operations, we could not have successfully done these operations. But more importantly, to thank those South Africans that have always alerted us, because our view, the security of our country, is our responsibility as a whole. We have also noted that in the world, there's been an increased phenomenon that has come into a sharper focus, the question of illicit financial flows. That a number of billions of rands, in terms of the statistics we have, sometimes they are understated, that we lose more than 80 billion per annum as an outflow, especially and then also in our continent, that the report that was also even done by the former President Mbeki on the behalf of the African Union, estimated it to be more than 80 to 19 billion US dollars. That money, if it had not been lost, it could have actually gone a very long way in addressing the challenges that our continent and our country face. We are trying to deal with the question of the moderate laws and cooperation because there are those countries that have become safe havens to deal with these particular issues. Therefore, we will continue to do our work, working with other law enforcement agencies, and especially with the South African Revenue Services to deal with these issues. We have spoken about the issues around the question of cyberspace, that in as much as it provides endless opportunities for economic growth, for friendship, and other things. But this space, too, is a space where heinous crimes, they do happen. Issues of cyber crimes, issues of international terrorism, where people, they use the same platforms to do radicalization and recruitment. And these are the matters we need to do. But as South Africa, we've put all the necessary legislation, but more importantly, we are trying to draw partnership across all sectors, whether academics, private sector, government, and NGOs, to work together to deal with these challenges of our time. We have agreed to build that necessary capacity of cyber experts, of young people. We will also have agreed that we will do civic education, but more importantly, to develop South Africa's own solution in terms of research and development. And in terms of making some of these issues to be crimes in our own country, we've finalized the cyber security bill and related crimes. It has gone to cabinet. We've received comments. Further engagements are happening with other stakeholders. And then very soon, we will embark on the parliamentary process. But more importantly, we're also building the capacity for the judiciary to respond, where more than 300 local magistrates and judges have been trained so that they can be able to adjudicate on these new issues. One of the issues we have also spoken to is the question of rooting out corruption and the devastating impact it has on our society. Working in the anti-corruption task team, we've done a lot in terms of the work that done by the Assessed Forfeiture Unit, and then the other issues that we did give the figures in the House. But more importantly, from our job, we'll continue to ensure that we root out corruption, irrespective where it raises its ugly head, and irrespective of the position you hold. Therefore, that's why we will move with speed to deal with the question of vetting of officials working in government. And more importantly, those officials who are working in the supply chain management. But there's a new issues of corruption that are happening. Officials who are working on critical infrastructure for service delivery, like your water, your electricity, and so forth. Those are some of those that we thought we should be able to look at. And we are going to go ahead to include even the state-owned enterprises, because those are the companies of the state. Those who are working them, they are being subjected to the same. But we're also building our own capacity to say, what is the possibility of creating a single vetting agency? And more importantly, we must be subjecting ourselves to lifestyle audits. People can't just wake up in the morning when we know that yesterday they were living in rags. Then they wake up the next morning. Now they are rich. They can't explain their fortunes. We also have to deal with the question of staff rotation as an example to deal with those other issues. We also had an opportunity when we addressed the House to deal with the question of domestic stability. One of the issues we raised very sharply is that we have seen that there are a number of incidents that are more worrying to us, where South Africans, they are exercising their rights to peaceful, unarmed, to demonstrate, present petitions, because this is the kind of a governance system we agreed to. But we have seen a number of incidents where certain South Africans, for using the plight of our people. They change these issues and undermine the rights of others. Where protests are more violent, there is a destruction of property. There is an incitement of violence. There is even a loss of life. And these people are doing certain of these things with impunity. As law enforcement agencies, South Africans who love our country, who cherish democracy and respect our constitution, must never condemn the law enforcement agencies when we're trying to get the rights of the majority of our South Africans being protected. Because your right cannot be so important than other people's rights. We will act very decisively to deal with those particular incidents. We know that there are also opportunist elements who are using genuine issues of our own people to deal with this question. We have seen it in the education sector, where students, they raise genuine issues. This government respond and say, we are dealing with the issues, but you could see the issue gets to be hijacked and perpetually it continues. We have seen in the public transport sector, in instances where certain people, like in KwaZulu-Natal, private security is being used to guard taxi owners, but some of those taxi private security firms are used as assassins, and a number of lives are being lost in the particular industry. The torching of our trains, collapsing of our public transport systems cannot go unchallenged. We also made a reference to the constitutional right in Chapter 2 of our Constitution, the Bill of Rights, that refers to our freedom of expression. The freedoms we all enjoyed in terms of Section 16, subsection 1, but that right, explicitly our Constitution, has made a limitation. There are those individuals who have proven themselves that one day they wake up and say they respect the Constitution, one day they go and do what is contrary to the Constitution. You cannot have a right that allows you to have a propaganda for war, incite violence, have hatred. And South Africans were sending a message to say, we'll do our part, we'll never allow the country to collapse in our hands, and South Africans must join us to protect our hard-won freedom and democracy. We also raised the question of certain incidents in our country where racism remains stubborn. South Africans, they've moved in trying to create that united, non-racial, non-sexist, democratic and prosperous society. But it continued to raise its ugly head in boardrooms, both in private sector and public sector. Other political parties, they have these racist elements being harbored, and some of them, they are actually soughting refuge in those parties. And we should not give them space. Even there are other countries whose democracy is very matured, these racist elements are there, and the incidents we've seen happening. Therefore, our call was that this rainbow nation that was built by our forebears should not be allowed to transcend back into chaos. We can't afford it. We raised lastly the question of terrorism. That remains a major security threat for all nations. And we have seen these issues happening in the Middle East. They have happened in Brussels, they have happened in Paris, they have happened in the West Africa, Central African Republic. And we say there is no nation, not a single nation is immune from these attacks. Working together with other security agencies of the world, we share information. More importantly, we cannot allow South Africa to become a breeding ground or a safe haven for terrorists in terms of recruitment, in terms of logistical support, in terms of planning, including the funding. In our country, there are South Africans who are visiting other parts of the world, either for business, either for humanitarian purposes, others for pilgrimage, and others are just going there as tourists. And these South Africans, they should never try to be in contact with those conflict areas. And in our missions and ourselves, we try to do those. But we know that recruitment is happening in South Africa, radicalization is happening in South Africa, and we have a responsibility that as parents, let's take a keen interest in what's happening. The organizations that are also using religion as a false and pseudo-ideology must be able to deal with these particular issues. Therefore, we are very alert in dealing with those, but we need that partnership to deal with the issues we have said. Lastly, we will continue to do our work to support His Excellency President Zuma with respect to the international work. Our policy is very clear. Our freedom came through global collaboration and partnership and solidarity. Therefore, to be in Africa, to ensure that the guns are silenced by 2020, we will continue to do our part, that issues around Libya, Mali, South Sudan, Burundi, the President is supported to discharge those responsibilities. And as I conclude, we also have to deal with this new phenomenon of regime change, where other countries, for one reason or the other, or non-state actors, for their narrow national security interest, they want to change regimes by raising issues of legality and legitimacy. The situation in Libya could have been avoided if no one had intentions to loot our resources. It has resulted to untold sufferings. The suffering of the people of Libya can't continue unchallenged. That people must perish in the Mediterranean Sea. The situation that has been continuing in Syria is a situation we must condemn. And the world is silent when there are certain issues that should be resolved, especially the conflict around the question of Palestine and Israel. The world order, as we have said in our own policy, we need to review the way we do our work, transform these institutions, because these institutions 70, 71 years ago, they were relevant, but the times have changed. So that at least all of us under one umbrella, which is the UN, will still be able to keep the world together. That is our message that we're able to raise today. South Africa remains strong, stable, and safe, but there are those elements that we know, and keeping an eye on them, that they should not undermine our democracy as we got it 22 years ago. Thank you very much, Comrade Brian.